adversity can significantly shape our lives and our perception of the world. It's very interesting because when you look and check in the sources, like as I was preparing for this talk about a week ago or so, I went to YouTube. There are like tons of YouTube videos, and quite a few of them, they talk about constructs such as willpower, resilience, and determination. However, as you really watch this, even inspirational ones, you realize that the concept of willpower becomes elusive. Although you know you need to have the willpower, but what is it really the willpower? How do I find it? And in some cases, even resilience is difficult for us to pinpoint what it is and how we do with what is the tool? What can I work with that is going to give me resilience? In this presentation, I will present a more nuanced approach that will incorporate what I have learned over the years, especially from philosophy, the philosophy of phenomenology, also known as narrative therapy, from cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and dialectical behavioral therapy. For those of you who are not therapists, I know those mean simply words, but I threw out there for the ones who are therapists, and they will know the background of where I'm coming from. Typically, people are not familiar with phenomenology, even in psychology. Phenomenology, this is why I decided to make this slide, just to say a couple of words about phenomenology. Phenomenology is a philosophical method. It's not really orientation, it's not really a school of philosophy, but a method founded by Husserl at the turn of the 20th century. And is a method of exploring how we experience the world. So basically, phenomenology is the philosophical study and even strategy of how the structures of experience and consciousness work together as we interact with the world. It emphasizes the importance of examining our perceptions, thoughts, and emotions as they appear to us without preconceptions or biases. For now, I want you to stop for a second, and I want to recall a recent or past adverse situation that you faced in your life. So you're going to use a little bit of the phenomenological method, and just to look, and if it was a past situation, I want you to try to recall how you processed that experience. And I want you to keep this in mind as we move along. Looking for a phenomenological perspective, in conjunction with some of the other therapy schools, we are going to run, when you talk about diversity, we're going to run into the situation and the story. So here we have the case of Sisyphus in Greek mythology, in which he was sentenced to be carrying this rock, huge round rock, all the way up to the top of the mountain. He was sentenced by the gods, and then they would drop the rock again all the way to the bottom, and he had to go all the way back to the bottom of the mountain and bring the huge rock all the way up. And this kept going on and on and on. So situation. When we encounter adversity, we are basically encounter a situation that is somehow challenging to us. I know this is self-evident, but we typically don't stop to really think about what the situation is and what it means. A situation, it refers to an objective reality, to the raw facts of what is happening. For example, losing a job is a situation. An individual, find out that he lost his job is a situation. So situations are real. For being real, they are factual, they are based on physicality, and they are relational. Situations means that you are relating to something. In fact, according to phenomenology, it is impossible for consciousness not to relate to something else, to something outside of consciousness. And the something, the situation, is typically called an object in phenomenology. So abuse, misfortune, discrimination, accidents, for example, all of these experiences are real. People get abused, people lose their jobs, people lose loved ones. Situations can be external, like losing the job, or can be internal, like having chronic physical pain or having intrusive thoughts. Although I just briefly mentioned those two types here, in therapy, this will be a huge, huge role in several sessions in helping the individuals to distinguish what is an external situation and what is a internal situation. So here's a situation, losing a job. One interesting thing, though, first of all, before I move on, when we look at the situation, I typically help my clients to describe situations, just like in cognitive behavior therapy, as when, where, who, and what. This what, over time, they learn to tell me in just a few sentences, 2, 3, 4 sentences, because this is the reality. This is a factual description of what is happening. Why is this? Because when we're facing the situation, we do not only see the situation, but something else happens. The mind quickly generates interpretations based on past experiences, fears, cultural conditioning, and personal biases. So the situations are going to activate stories. At the moment we face a situation, we'll come up, we'll add a whole other layer on the top of the situation. And there is this layer or those stories that we add over the top of the situation that can become problematic. Those stories often they come so swiftly, so quickly, and so powerfully that they feel as the real as the situation in itself. In fact, when we do this, we confuse both of them and we cannot tell which one is which. So here in this slide, I have a situation, losing a job, and then the individual will have a story. And the story is, I am a failure. I will never find another job. This is the end of my career. And this is typically the scenario that I have when patients or clients, they will come to me. So they will be bringing a situation and they will be also bringing a story about that situation. It's very, very important for you to notice the difference between both of them. So the story are basically thoughts, meanings, interpretations, reasonings, narratives, assumptions, biases, or even readings of what is happening. The story will filter how we relate to the real world. All of us, when we face a situation, we automatically come with this filter, with this story. Interestingly, the story, most of the time, is not real. And because it's not real, this story is going to be limiting. I even say that this story can be a straitjacket for individuals. So now you imagine an individual who is facing an adverse situation and is wearing a straitjacket. This is going to make it very difficult for this individual to act properly in face of the situation. The stories are always happening. The story is fate. And the story provides no growth, opportunities for the individual. And the story can be seen as a black hole because the moment when the story comes that you enter your story, the story is not going to allow you to get out of it. It becomes difficult the more and more this story, or you get into this story. So what happened here is that losing the job and the stories that we tell about losing the job, we do a conflating or overlapping. We overlap the story with the situation. We mix, we fuse, we blend to a point that we cannot tell which is which, and it becomes very difficult to separate both of them. So I want you now to stop for a second and begin reflecting. How many people out there in this world are overlapping their stories with the situations that are happening to them? And how many people are really unable to distinguish which one is which? Is this the situation? Is it my story about the situation? This is a very, very important question because when situations and stories are mixed up, the consequences can be very profound. The individual typically will not be able to pull apart what is the real situation and what is a story, and this can mobilize the person. This is often the critical unnoticed process that prevents us from powerfully responding to the adversity. The individual doesn't realize that he is reacting not just to the situation, but to the story that they have created around them. This reaction is often disproportionate and misaligned with the reality. As the individual comes with the situation, facing difficult situations or adversity, this will trigger the story, and this story can lead the individual into a state of destabilization, which will lead farther into disempowerment and eventually to a breakdown. And breakdown is a place in which the person finds themselves hopeless, helpless, powerless, with any meaning to life, a purpose, and even alienated. As you can see, these descriptors fit very nicely with descriptors for example, major depressive disorder. In fact, the diversity can lead into depression in some individuals. And now I want you to look back. I asked you earlier to picture a situation that you faced in the past or in the present, and that you felt it was an adverse situation in your life. And now I want to think and notice, have I conflated or have I overlapped what happened in this story with the actual situation? The situation can be a situation involving a particular relationship or interacting with someone, a condition in your job, or anything else, in fact. Okay. Why am I saying this? Because one of the most powerful things that you can do when you're facing adversity is to be able to distinguish the situation from your story, to be able to pull them apart. Okay. I was going to talk some more and see what is really the content of this story, but this is going to be expanded in a greater detail in a future lecture. So I will skip this section of the content of what it is really inside of this story, and what am I telling myself? What are the stories that I'm telling myself that make me feel so powerless? Another important content is, how were those stories generated? I plan on giving future lectures in which I will discuss all the mechanisms that will lead us from the past to create this story. But basically, what I want to say for now is that when we face situations, we are come up with a story, and this story is going to lead into emotions. For example, fear. This story is deeply influenced by the past, but it is the fear or any other emotion, shame, guilt, sadness, shock, distress, that is going to be the very first thing that will affect us, that is going to register in our consciousness, and that you are going to notice. Have you noticed that? Typically, we don't pay attention to the story, but we pay attention to the emotions, and we are going to be acting under the influence of those emotions. Okay. This is just to reiterate the idea that these emotions is or are what is going to lead into the destabilization of the individual, disempowerment, and the breakdown. Now, one important thing is that the emotions are connected to the past through reacting. And the concept of reacting versus responding is a very powerful distinction that I used in therapy to teach individuals to pay attention when they face adversity. Am I reacting to the situation, or am I responding to the situation? As you can, when you look closely, reacting means to react, to act again and again and again. Or it's basically to be doing the same thing over and over and over. Have you been in difficult situations that you find yourself like, oh no, I'm in that situation again. I'm doing the same thing again, and we feel stuck. This is the reacting. In psychodynamics, reacting is called the reenactment, or the individual keeps reenacting what has been he or she has been doing in the past. How do we overcome those situations? How do we overcome this overlapping, this conflation of situation with the story? Beautiful saying, we fall, we break, we fell, but then we rise and we heal and we overcome. This is one of the key important things for the person to begin to understand, is that it is through adversity that we grow. Adversity was not designed for people to grow. However, it is a reality of life. And since we're given that reality, we use it to our advantage to grow. And how do we overcome adversity? Overcome adversity requires a continual daily practice of tools designed to empower the individual. It is not a pill. You have to be practicing those tools. It is an experiential process in which you learn how to overcome adversity by practicing. It's like learning a foreign language. It's like learning how to swim, how to drive, gosh, even how to walk. Adversity is then seen as an opportunity for learning growth, as I mentioned earlier. So the very first thing that is important to do is to pull situation from the story. How do you do this? You describe the situation. You become factual. This is one of the most important things I do to some clients in therapy, is to begin to help them to distinguish and to see their story for what they are and their situation. Is this that I'm telling myself the actual situation, or is this my story about the situation? The moment the individual do this, boom, they will open a space, a place for growth. Because as I mentioned before, when you fuse, when you mix, when, and I keep using different terms, overlap the situation, the story, there is no place to grow here. There is no place to grow here. As you face like losing a job, as you face like losing a loved one, as you face a very difficult situation, when the story comes and is overlapped with the situation, it's not going to allow you to grow. So you have to begin distinguishing and seeing the situation for what it is. So in other words, when you create this place of growth, you become present to what it is in front of you. I know it's seems even philosophical to say this in a talk, but in therapy, this become organic, this become a reality, because as I'm moving the clients through whatever it is that they are facing, they begin to see how this really work. This is the beauty of it. This is the beauty of therapy. I've had patients like down in Orlando, Florida, in which struggled with drug abuse, especially cocaine, heroin, homelessness, and feeling very powerless about their situation. When they started learning how to distinguish their thoughts and work with the thoughts in creating this growth, transformation, huge changes started happening in their life, that which for me became very inspiring. For some, it took 3 months, some it took 6 months, some it took 3 years. But I have seen before my eyes people creating amazing changes by just beginning to separate those two elements. Another aspect of this story, when you become a present to the story, when you begin seeing what you are telling yourself about the situation, you begin to question, is this positive? Is this story helpful? Is this story healthy? Is this story accurate? And now I hear is an element of cognitive behavioral therapy. And finally, is this story, as I'm facing these situations, as I'm facing this adversity, empowering? The typical answer is no. This situation is a negative situation. This story, I should say, is a negative story. This story is not helping me. I'm telling myself I'm a failure. I'm telling myself I'll never find another job. This is not being helpful. This is not healthy. This is not even accurate. I'm not a failure. This is not true. This is not empowering. As the individual begins to see the story for what it is, they begin to pull themselves out of the story, which is another very powerful step. Here I'm discussing about how to become present, how it is present by not reacting and responding. And this is the step I was telling you a second ago, to come out of this story. I have here in the slide saying we could think that one option to a negative story, if you really think about this, well, this is all a negative story. So let me create a positive story. And I discovered through clinical experience that this is not really the case. It's not to create a positive story. It's really to come out of it, to come out of your story. In other words, to come out of the preconceptions that we have about what is real. Okay, you step out of it. We do this by noting the disempowering effect that these stories have in ourselves. We hear these stories, but we begin not to have a conversation with those stories. This is another very important step that happens in therapy when they begin to come out or step out of the story. And as they start doing this, they begin feeling more empowered because they begin seeing their new ability to challenge those situations. As they see the new ability, they begin to, believe it or not, accept the situation for what is, not for what it should be. And I know for those who are therapists, this is radical acceptance is a concept from dialectical behavioral therapy, but this is a natural consequence of when people will step out of the story and begin to see the situation for what it is. And this is the most important part of the therapy, is when the shift occurs. The shift mindset occurs when you become open because you created a space, became open to this challenge with what you lost at the beginning. You become open to hope, to faith, to excitement, to curiosity. Why? Because you realize that the situation is not really going to crush you. It will crush you if you let. If you let, situations will or can crush you. But as you separate yourself from the situation and you begin to see objectively, you will realize that what was hopelessness will become hopefulness. What was helplessness will become help. It seems like too philosophical, but it's an actual reality that I have my clients to experience in sessions. And for me, again, it's very inspiring to see them to go through this. And they leave the fears and stories behind to create a new space and a new possibility.